topic today is actually something that's quite near and dear to my heart, as geeky as that might sound. Prior to my life on the investing side, I spent about a decade in capital markets. And then more recently, I was at the US Treasury Department during the Obama administration. So when I think about RegTech, I see immense opportunity when you think about the new technologies and the ability to do things faster, better, and cheaper. And then also when you think about on the incumbent side, the huge amount of money, the huge amount of costs, the huge amount of resources and reputation risk that are all involved in making sure you get your RegTech solutions right. But that being said, it has not been an easy road the last couple years, and I think our panel today will give us a very interesting perspective on the opportunities going forward and some of the challenges currently. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is just ask the panelists to introduce themselves very quickly, and we'll dive right into questions after that. Christina's?
Hi everyone, I'm Christina Soviany, co-founder and CEO of Features Analytics, a technology company from Belgium, providing financial crime compliance solutions based on AI. Personally, I have a PhD in applied sciences and I work for Philips, and then I moved to Belgium where I joined another company where I was leading the team to develop a new technology for cancer detection and ultrasound imaging. And that's where I got the idea to start applying the same principles, AI-based, to detect fraud, which is a cancer of the financial industry. So at Features Analytics, we originally started with developing technology and platform for transaction scoring for real-time fraud detection and prevention and AML. But more recently, we are very focused on trading surveillance. This is detection of manipulations in the financial instruments like foreign exchange, equities, fixed income. Very happy to be here today to join this panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Andreas, CEO of IDnow, a company based out of Munich, Germany. We're in the identity verification space, working mainly with banks and financial services institutions during the onboarding and KYC process, trying to make this as compliant, secure, and seamless and smooth for the customer at the same time as possible, with offices in London and Paris, serving from there the European market.
I am Pascal from Neterium, a company based out of Belgium too. So we are a watchlist screening API. So I've been in financial technology and software for about 30 years, regulation and compliance for about 20 years, working for companies like Swift and Euronext, then moving on specifically in the screening side. So today what we do is really we have a screening API, which is really available in the cloud and that you can integrate into digital platforms, e-commerce solutions, treasury solutions, and so on. So really very relevant to the panel, and I look forward to see what we have to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Richmond. I'm the founder and CEO of Cube. So we're a RegTech firm, quite a mature RegTech firm. We're 9 years in, which makes us probably one of the longer-running RegTech firms. We've got a global coverage in 6 countries. Our customers are worldwide. And when asked what we do, I really talk about it as automation. So we effectively help large tier 1 financial firms understand what their regulatory obligations are. And in understanding those regulatory obligations, being able to help automate the processes that they have downstream in terms of regulatory mapping and regulatory analysis of the requirements that they've got to observe.
Great. Well, thanks. So let's just jump in and actually start from the top in terms of the title of this panel. The toolbox to face regulatory complexity. So I guess I would. This is kind of a two-part question. Number one, how do you define RegTech? And number two, when you think about a toolbox, how does your solution fit into that toolbox, and what does that broader toolbox look like today? So whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
So from my perspective, how do I define RegTech? I think it's a collection of technologies that are and solutions that are addressing specific regulations which are issued by market authorities and regulatory bodies. If I talk more specifically, there are certain pillars in specifically focused on the financial industry, like compliance, risk management, like regulatory reporting, transaction monitoring. I must say at Features Analytics, we are at the intersection between compliance, risk management and transaction monitoring. In terms of technologies, what we see, it's a collection of methodologies like machine learning, AI, data analytics, let's call it like this. It's data governance, cloud computing, so all these natural language processing, so all these technologies contributing together to build certain solutions, to provide certain solutions. Now, if I focus more specifically on what we do at Features Analytics, as you know, every firm operating in financial markets, they need to survey their activity and report any kind of suspicious behavior. And the penalties for not doing this are gigantic. Actually, they are in the range between millions and billions of dollars. And what we do, we have developed innovative platform and solutions to address these problems. And especially to address the problems in a combination between foreign exchange, equities, fixed income, cross instruments. We are working with market infrastructures, investment banking, with exchanges and trading venues to solve this problem.
Thank you.
So that was a very comprehensive definition already. So not much to add to that. I would look at it, RegTech probably as the conduit of the regulator to deliver modern regulatory policy to today's consumer and B2B markets, which are probably marked by a high degree of complexity, high value transaction typically where you find regulation, and ultimately also substantially changed compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago, substantially changed user behavior and set of user expectations. The way we try to service these markets and craft our toolbox with a strong focus on eliminating geo-complexity from regulation. So if you look at even the EU, which is harmonized in terms of regulation in certain areas, it's not in others. If you think about anti-money laundering regulation, it's highly diverse across the different countries. So we provide a solution to enterprise clients that help them navigate and service these markets from a single toolbox. We work closely with our clients to optimize the conversion along a very complex onboarding process, which I'd say the two most relevant aspects of our toolbox.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to add a lot about fintech, RegTech itself, but what I find kind of interesting in the toolbox aspect is that in the last 5 years, RegTech itself has moved from all these vertical solutions that people used to buy before, like very integrated solutions, and which ended up each addressing a specific regulatory aspect. And therefore ending by having people having one screen for each application and having nothing very integrated, to a situation today where you have much more of an ecosystem and people can and organization can pick and choose different components and assemble them to perfectly map the regulations that they have to obey to. And I think that's the really fascinating transformation that we see today. And how we, and that's the premise on which we have created our company, which is we provide that very simple screening components, and we certainly hope that a lot of other colleagues are going to provide a lot of other components.
And just picking up on that point, because I think it's an interesting one. So when you see the transition from sort of pinpoint solutions to more of an ecosystem approach, like a collective toolbox, does that take friction out of the market in terms of providing your services? Does it create more competition? How does that help at the sort of the end customer level?
Yeah, I think from the end customer point of view, it creates healthy competition because, and it creates this whole marketplace movement that you see today, where you have solutions available in marketplaces and not anymore as CDs with 20 guys in black coming installing for 6 months, which is the previous generation. So I think it's very healthy. I think it's also something that is addressing the needs of the new players in the market, because I think the players in the market that are regulated now and that have relation to money, for example, like Fintech, it's not banks anymore. So they are technology companies. They understand what an API is, and they just want that small component. They don't want to have to install a whole stuff.
Great. Ben?
Sure. I might come in it a bit more holistically than that. So, so when we think about RegTech, we think about transformation. And you've got really an opportunity in the world of RegTech where the whole regulatory world has been very underserved in terms of finding technological solutions and being able to automate all of the data and all of the processes that exist within the regulatory environment. So in the financial firms that we're working with, we very much see RegTech as that opportunity to transform and to bring technology to the fore across a lot of what are manual processes and manual ways of doing things, and being able to leverage that technology to help automate. And I think the other aspect to that is the volume of data that you're generally working with in the regulatory space. So, from a Cube example, we process and understand 20 million different regulatory statements, which you just couldn't do as a group of people. You couldn't do as an army of compliance operatives within a bank. And we're processing and understanding those to be able to classify them and work out what they relate to. And so in that scenario, we're bringing technology, machine learning, natural language processing, to applying that to regulatory data to help understand what it is and actually what it's relevant to. So to me, RegTech is a way in which you can bring technology into that environment and deliver incremental benefit in terms of automation to customers.
Yeah, so maybe picking up on that point, Ben, and first to you and then to the rest of the panel, let's maybe drill down on the technology use cases here and kind of give us some examples. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from your own business, or it could be more broadly, but talk about specific technologies and quantify the sort of the delta you're seeing in what you're able to do today versus 5-10 years ago, or with manual processes.
Sure. So. Yeah, so there's what there is now in RegTech is a whole number of different use cases. You can kind of look at the RegTech market and split it up and say, okay, so this may relate to financial crime, this might relate to conduct, this might relate to operational risk. Cyber was something that we were hearing about earlier on. Obviously, AML solutions are probably the best socialized now and most widespread in terms of adoption in RegTech. So you kind of see all those different component areas that are now coming up within the RegTech space. But to give an example of where we can see hard savings and real returns for customers, one example in where we get involved is that large financial institutions have teams of people dedicated to just staying up to date with regulation. So it's a very, very simple task in principle, which is, okay, do we know what regulation is applicable, and do we know when it changes? But actually that process is incredibly manual, and there's lots of people who are just doing the same thing again and again every single day. So it's kind of those repetitive, duplicative tasks that we see that you can literally take out hard savings just by being able to bring in technology to automate those repetitive manual processes. So again, for us, we look at it through the lens of the data, and we say, okay, within the world of the data, how can we automate, how can we take out those repetitive tasks, and how can we remove the duplication?
Okay, I guess to the rest of the panel, maybe talk about the specific technologies and the sort of the process improvement that you're seeing and are able to achieve. Andreas.
I think more on the consumer side. If you look at consumer experience of identity verification, less than 10 years ago, you would probably have to earmark 10 days for your identity to be verified in either the Postident in Germany, which would be like you would visit the mail, the office of the local mail, and then queue up and have the process initiated, and they would verify the identity. They would send it in, confirm 8 to 10 days. With the advent of video-based solutions in 2013-14, this would go down to anything between 8 and 10 minutes. And with the advent of AI and machine learning these days, which allows us to automate the process, will come down to probably a minute or so, and no human interaction involved anymore. So I think it's a pretty good example of how things evolved over a period of 10 years, right? Because we always look at 1 year and 6 months, but if you 10 years, comes down from 10 days to a minute.
Yeah. So in financial crime is a very good example of very inefficient process. So when technologies were applied and even very basic machine learning AI techniques, of course they've improved over time, but there are a lot of the first users are banks, of course, and a lot of banks out of there would actually kill to have like even 30% reduction in terms of alert, of noise, of waste that they have. So in the FCC space, there is the application of AI and machine learning has really been a game changer, and it is actually twofold. You've seen the first generation where basically we worked a lot after the alert and the data were produced, and we tried to. A lot of people try to automate decision by basically trying to replace human operators by robots. So basically the whole RPA movement. And what you see now is that this movement is moving up front, and we're trying to actually make detection processes which are actually producing less weight, and you see really that shift.
Great. Yeah, Christina, so you're a big user of AI in your platform, so maybe kind of tease that out for us.
Yes, thank you. So I want to comment about the use case in trading surveillance and how new technologies can help. So what we see there is that regulators are establishing very basic principles, and very good so, where they are describing all kinds of manipulative and misconduct behavior like spoofing, layering, ramping, painting the tape, momentum ignition, and you name it. Now, what organizations are doing and legacy solutions, they are taking all these principles and they try to transpose them in all kinds of rules where you need to set up a lot of parameters depending on the liquidity of the stock, the geography of the market, the time of the day, and you name it. So we see that actually these solutions, and this is what we hear from the prospects and the clients, they are producing huge numbers of alerts, but mostly these are not interesting cases to be investigated and not suspicious cases. What we do at Features Analytics, we took a completely different approach. So we try to solve this problem by simplicity, using simplicity, but also technology, machine learning, supervised, unsupervised, and AI. So we have designed a solid and robust platform which can analyze and describe at any moment of time what is the normal activity of the market, and by this we are able to, in fact, detect all the suspicious behavior. Now, this approach is unique, and for each case, in fact, we just produce, by using AI and our platform, we produce high-quality alerts in a minimal number. And each case is accompanied by a score, which is a measure of how different is this case and how much it deviates from the normality of what the market and the market participants are doing, and the reasons why. The reasons why are attached to important explanations that we provide on the case, and this is more and more required by the regulators. And why we are able to do this? Because by using AI and our platform, we work by adding to the data and creating intelligent insights. And then we use these intelligent insights in machine learning, supervised and unsupervised anomaly detection to detect the suspicious cases. And by working like this, we have proved that we can reduce the number of alerts, for instance, working with a top investment bank in the equities market from thousands of alerts per day to a handful of 10, 20, while finding very risky cases for the firm.
Great. Maybe let's try and kind of get a little bit more granular here. And I'm going to ask a trick question. So are you selling vitamins or painkillers? And by that, I mean, I think there's a perception in the marketplace when you think about regulatory compliance, particularly pre-crisis, it's a check-the-box exercise. You know, obviously post-crisis, it's a very expensive, what you might call a check-the-box exercise, but it's also, you know, CEOs and boardrooms are in trouble if they get it wrong. But there's less recognition, I think, about RegTech as an offensive tool for growth and the ability either through solving problems and freeing up human resources or, you know, in the case of like Andreas's business, you know, onboarding of customers. So, you know, I'd be curious as to how you view your service. And, you know, there's no right or wrong answer, but, you know, again, are you in the sort of the painkiller business or the vitamin business?
Can I start?
Go ahead, Christine.
Just to continue on my previous idea, I think it makes sense to say that it's both. I just want to give you an example. For example, we were working with another investment bank where the original question was, can you develop a solution for us to detect manipulations in the foreign exchange market at the fixed time? They were interested in the WMR, the London fixed time, but other fixes per day. Now, by the way we work, and we can monitor and survey the activity all along the day, we provided them with a solution that can detect manipulations in the current exchange market at any moment of time, not only at the fix. And because we are creating these intelligent insights in the data, in fact, they realize, but we also, that they can use this solution and the insights that we create to assess the P&L of their traders at any moment of time. So what originally was a solution to address the compliance issues, so like a painkiller, it became also a vitamin and a solution which was very interesting for the business profitability.
Okay.
I think just by design, IDnow is more in the painkiller than in the vitamin business. We're handed over the responsibility from our clients to conduct anti-money laundering screening and prevention on their behalf. They are ultimately still the obliged under anti-money laundering regulation, but the responsibility of operating that part of the business is handed over to us. So we'd better make sure that we have painkillers and not vitamins. To make this a bit more tangible, I mean, we ultimately see each and every fraud case that would cause any damage on our clients, that it would slip through the system. So the wrong guys that would make it through the system despite all the diligence applied before. That's typically less than 1%, aiming around, depending on the product, depending on the use case, 0.5% of all the guys in the system, the bad guys in the system. So yeah, very strictly monitored, very high pressure environment from a client point of view, a lot of money and trust and reputational value at stake. So yeah, painkiller more than vitamin.
Okay, I don't believe too much in the narrative. Compliance can be an advantage. I think this is a bit of marketing BS that we vendors like to use sometimes. But definitely, I think that the role of RegTech the RegTech has a role to play in restoring the balance between operations and control. I think the bad things start to happen when situation moves too much to the control side. What you see, for example, for the moment with sanctions, honestly, sanctions is a great tool because it's much better than starting a war. But at the same, and you know that because you're coming from Treasury, and sanctions can be a very effective tool to induce a change of policy of a foreign state. But on the other hand, if you press too much, what you're going to see is people like Iran and North Korea and Russia saying to each other, well, we're all sanctioned. Why do we not create a parallel system? You know. Yeah. So that's how you can see when the balance shifts too much to control, bad things start to happen. So I think RegTech is, and I see RegTech today. But okay, mostly in the financial crime space. I see RegTech as really the tool of whereby the regulated community, which still takes order from the regulator, has a way to follow the extreme speed of the President of the United States Twitter when there are new sanctions to be enabled. Well, I think that RegTech is a way to restore this balance. And in that sense, I think it is still a check-the-box exercise, because at the end of the day, we're here to protect our customers. That's our business, our focus. But at the same time, we try to do it in a way that makes the overall balance between operation and control be somewhere in the middle and not create too much friction.
Ben, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I was sitting here thinking I'd probably describe it, a step before that. We probably go from critical surgery to kind of rehabilitation to then painkillers to then vitamins, maybe, vitamins as you might call them. But it definitely starts before the point of the painkiller. I think, the reality is, and any of the big financial firms, if you speak to a chief compliance officer, they'll candidly recognize this. The reality is that they're struggling incredibly to keep up with the pace of regulatory change, and to be able to deliver a systemic capability across the firm that deals with all things regulatory. And a lot of the functions have significant challenges in maintaining that. So so therefore certainly the way we see RegTech, it absolutely is about delivering something that needs to be delivered to solve a problem, and because it's typically not getting done right by people, and you need the advent of artificial intelligence and natural language processing and machine learning to be able to help bring some clever technologies into play that will help speed up what's getting done and improve the accuracy of it. And so often you can be the bandage or the elastoplast, if you like. But then once you're in that environment with a customer, then really it's about, okay, where are now the opportunities to get more proactive and to actually look at where there's areas of improvement. And I used to be in the camp of thinking that RegTech was when people talk about competitive advantage, that it wasn't really in that bracket. But I've come, the more we've deployed our solutions globally, and we've got customers in 120 plus countries using our service, I've seen a difference in that, in the sense that if, for example, you're really efficient in embracing a new regulatory change that affects, say, an equities product, and you can go straight from change to the appropriate controls on bringing new product to market. If you can do that in a week rather than 3 months, you can bring new product to market much quicker. And if you can bring product to market much quicker, you can gain competitive advantage. And that's not to mention things like margin improvement, which is where the battleground is for a lot of financial firms now. RegTech is, to me, one of the biggest opportunities to achieve that. So that's how I'd say it. So the vitamins come, but you've got to do it in that order.
Okay, so I could extend the vitamin painkiller analogy further, but I'm not going to. Let's shift gears. But so we've heard a lot about technology. We've heard a lot about your solutions. We've heard about how great RegTech is. But sort of the elephant in the room here is it's still been very difficult to get traction. And I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about the industry as a whole. There have been very few breakout RegTechs. And from where I sit, a lot of this is understandable. On the one hand, you have that traditional fintech incumbent dynamic, which is never easy. But then you throw in the regulatory aspect, and all of a sudden everyone's kind of afraid of their shadows. Incumbents are very hesitant to try a new algorithm out that'll help their RegTech or help their compliance, and go talk to the OCC or the regulator about it and say, yeah, I'm going to lay off 50% of my compliance folks because I found this great new algorithm. That's not a good conversation starter. So yeah, I think one of the challenges is sort of navigating that kind of three-way relationship between the incumbent, the startup, and the regulator. So stepping back, I guess, I'd be curious for your general observations as to, what are the points of friction here? What's preventing you and others from breaking out? I mean, it is a long sales cycle, that we know, but what are some of the kind of the barriers from moving faster? And I throw that out to go for it.
Okay. Well, the first thing is, first of all, RegTech by definition is a kind of hidden industry because we're not really exposed to the customers. So I think that's the first thing. There is an aspect of perception, okay, because it's not because you have a great screening solution or a great ML solution or a great ID solution that, I mean, the bank is not necessarily going to advertise that a lot. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is certainly a regulatory aspect in the sense that banks are not afraid from their shadow, or fintech the same thing, but they're definitely afraid from the regulator. So when the regulator gives a hint that they might encourage, like Vincent did recently, for example, okay, you have to be open to innovation. Just because in terms of scalability, you're not going to be able to address the volumes that we are pushing on you now. So we are actually encouraging that. And you really see that as a game changer. As soon as you have this small hint from the regulator, it might be okay, then you see a lot more firms embracing RegTech.
So for you, the friction is kind of the regulatory clarity to kind of define the rules of the road. Is that fair?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's important that because compliance people tend to be quite literal in their interpretation of what the regulators say. Yeah. So if the regulator says something like, it might be okay, well, that may not be enough for them. They need a definite, it's okay.
Yeah. Does everyone agree with that?
I don't disagree with that, but I put a different view as to why some of the key challenges are there in terms of sort of barrier to to entry on the sales. I mean, first of all, you have to be incredibly patient and persistent in the world of RegTech and selling RegTech solutions because we're often working to a sales cycle of a year. We just closed a large deal. We spent 2 years on that deal. Could have not got over the line in the last 5 minutes. So that's the reality of kind of, I think, the industry that we're in. But the point I'd like to make is you have to look at who you're selling to. So if you think about it, as a RegTech firm, you're typically, broadly speaking, selling to 3 different types of individual. You're selling to legal, compliance, and technology. And you have to appreciate that when you're selling to these firms and to these individuals that, compliance will be looking at you and saying, well, that's what I do. And you're now going to automate all of that. So then what happens next? Legal are going to be saying, well, we clearly know a lot more than what your black box knows, and we're a lot smarter. And therefore, why are you here? And then you've got technology saying, whoa, hold on. This isn't our infrastructure. This isn't kind of part of our strategy here. What's this black box you want to put in the corner, and why have we got to connect to it in the cloud? And and actually this all feels a bit alien to where we want to be from a regulatory perspective. So you take those 3 dynamics, and you have to fully appreciate that and work through a process of partnering, of being able to demonstrate, where and how you're actually going to add value, why it's a good thing for technology, why it's a good thing for compliance, why you're not trying to replace, the legal expertise, but actually add value to it. So for me, I spent 9 years working with customers, and it's that dichotomy and those 3 personalities that you've really got to spend time with to say, look, this is kind of where we're trying to get to together. And there's a great outcome, but you've got to take time to get through that.
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, just to add something, from my point of view, I think it's more a combination between incumbent culture, especially in large organizations, but not only, and a lot of times, but I think, I must say things are moving, lack of an affinity for trying new technologies and new innovations. So I think this is what we see now. Not mentioning the sales cycles. Yes, the sales cycles are big, but I have different examples. For instance, working with a small institution, it took 2 years to engage. Working with a huge one, it took 8 months. So it differs. So you cannot generalize.
Yeah. Andreas?
Yeah, maybe just one point to be added to that. I think I second everything that Pascal and Ben said. But I think it's also fair to say that only in the last couple of years we had really the technology available to build tools to tackle the complexity of what RegTech and RegTech challenges really mean to enterprise clients today. So I would argue that RegTech as we know it today and as we define it and get excited about it is still very, very early in its life cycle, as opposed to maybe Fintech, which has been around for 10, 15 years, other consumer services been around for 15, 20 years maybe. Probably RegTech only is in the first inning still.
Yeah. So no, I'd like to kind of pick up on this general thread because I think, obviously there's the issue with regulatory clarity, then there's the issue of engaging with incumbents and clients and that sort of sales cycle. Certainly from the VC perspective, when you think about that sales cycle, that can take longer than a year. I mean, I think we jokingly refer to it as the valley of death because you're kind of marching through trying to, secure the deal to get some revenue visibility, and that's very critical when every dollar or euro counts. And it's very hard for an investor to get that visibility as to where the traction is, where's the product market fit, and will this work? So that's more of an aside, but I think given that we may have potential customers in the room here, I guess without lecturing them, and I guess what anonymous advice would you give to potential customers in how best to engage, not necessarily with your platform, with your business, but with a RegTech in general? Everyone has the examples of being pinballed from one office to the next and no one's making a decision, or there's just one person who can say no and that's the end of it. But like, has there been a process or a framework or, what advice would you give to a potential customer if you could kind of dictate as to how the process would work in terms of the sales cycle?
Okay.
I would say to be more open to innovation, obviously. We try to make things as simple as possible. For instance, people can engage in organizations just to test the solutions for 1 day. It's accessible on the cloud. You just go there, you put your data, you inject your data, and you test it. Or you watch a demo, and then it's easy maybe to also work afterwards on-premise to take a decision if to do a more tailored project. So to be more open to innovation. That's my advice to all the organizations in general.
Okay.
And adding to that, engaging in the dialogue. I think on the compliance side, you'll find a lot of people taking very literally the word of the regulator and being very protective about their interest. I think as RegTech companies, we tend to understand a little bit of what we're doing there, and maybe sometimes even a little bit more. So to engage in the dialogue and to even provide an opportunity to help the client find the best solution is something that sounds very trivial, but it's something that we've not always find, in particular when talking to financial institutions.
And does that dialogue involve a dialogue with regulators, or is that, okay?
Just with the client across the various stakeholders within the organization, typically.
What's interesting to see in firms and enterprise in general is that for every single vertical, when there is something to be done, there is some decision point where we decide, okay, are we going to build this or are we going to buy this? Except in compliance. Because there is, it's like, oh, no, this is dangerous. No, we don't even ask this question because we have these brilliant people, like you said, people from IT, they know everything, and people from compliance and know everything. So let's do everything in-house because it's much safer. And I think my single advice to every firm, be it fintech or banks, is really, okay, it's going to be okay, because eventually some of vendors which are very specialized, usually very specialized in one specific vertical, are so much better than you in understanding that specific vertical.
Yep.
And they also have the experience from so many other customers and how they engage with the with the regulator. So I mean, when I used to be a consultant before in the RegTech space, I mean, the first question that every customer would ask me when parameterizing a system was, okay, what do the others do? Just tell us. Yeah. So, because they don't want, to have their head, sticking out. So, so I think the build or buy question is something that needs to be asked also in the compliance vertical.
Ben, so I guess you have the last word.
Okay. So last word. So I think maybe a little bit controversial then in that case, because I think one of the things, right, that I'd say is the whole world of proof of concepts. And everyone's very familiar with proof of concepts. The RegTech industry is synonymous with proof of concepts because either nobody believes that what we're saying can be done, or actually the customer is really still trying to work out what their requirements are, what is it they're trying to achieve, and looking, toe in the water, looking at all these different technologies and capabilities and these, wow, exciting, sexy things that, might one day be the answer to all prayers as far as, the regulatory world's concerned. So what we find is that when you get into a process with a customer and they're running multiple proof of concepts, we normally find it never actually goes anywhere. And again, we've been doing this for 9 years, and we now generally stay away from those. And the reason we do that is because they generally lack a really, really clear mandate, senior level sponsorship, at the exco level, a budget, a clearly defined business case, a compelling need that says we've got to do this thing and we've got to do it by this time. And we would get into proof of concepts where there were 3, 4, sometimes even 6 or 7 other vendors. And we just found that has created a kind of perpetual sort of dip your toe in the water, have a look, see kind of motion. And, so I'd say the biggest thing is really nail down the business case, the need, get the sponsorship, and then go through a process, run the process, RFP, whatever it needs to be, and then pick a vendor and say, right, come in, run the proof of concept, absolutely, but pick that vendor, say it's yours to lose. You've got to come in and knock this out the park. We've got to prove something out here that can scale. And come and do it. And to me, that's typically the way that you achieve the outcome than kind of trying to cast the net much, much wider.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody, very much. This has been a great panel, and I'm afraid our time is up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.